Carl Jung, 7 Signs Someone is Quietly Manipulating You. Few people realize that the most dangerous form of manipulation leaves no visible marks. There are no raised voices. No obvious threats. No moments you can point to and say with certainty, that was wrong. Instead, there is something far subtler and far more corrosive, the slow, almost imperceptible reshaping of how you think, what you feel, and who you believe yourself to be. By the time most people recognize they are being manipulated, the damage is already done. They have already doubted themselves into silence. They have already apologized for things that were not their fault. They have already shrunk, quietly, gradually, without ever being asked directly to become smaller. Carl Jung spent decades studying the hidden mechanics of the human psyche. He understood that the most powerful psychological forces are never the obvious ones. They operate beneath the surface of conscious awareness, moving through the gaps between what people say and what they mean, between what relationships appear to be and what they actually are. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is precisely what skilled manipulators rely on. They make you feel responsible for their emotional state. This is where most manipulation begins. And it begins so gently that it feels like love. The manipulator, early in the relationship, establishes a connection between their emotional well-being and your behavior. When you do what they want, they are warm, open, at ease. When you do something that doesn't serve their interests, they become cold, withdrawn, visibly hurt, without ever directly saying what you did wrong or what they need from you. Most people interpret this dynamic as sensitivity, as emotional depth. They see a person who feels things intensely, and they respond with care. They begin modifying their behavior, unconsciously, gradually, to maintain the emotional temperature of the relationship. To keep the peace. To avoid the withdrawal. But here is what is actually happening beneath the surface. The manipulator has discovered something about you, that your empathy can be used as a lever. That your desire to not cause pain makes you exquisitely controllable. Every time you adjust your behavior to manage their emotional state, you are training yourself to prioritize their comfort over your own truth. And every time that adjustment goes unremarked, every time the warmth returns without acknowledgement of what you sacrificed to produce it, the pattern deepens. Jung called this the inflation of the persona, the process by which a person's social performance grows so consuming that their authentic self disappears beneath it. In this case, it is not the manipulator's persona that inflates. It is yours, the performed, carefully managed version of yourself that exists to keep someone else stable. Epictetus was blunt about this. He wrote that no one can make you feel anything without your participation. What the manipulator has done is secured your participation, quietly, without your conscious agreement. The moment someone's emotional state becomes your responsibility to manage, you have stopped being their partner. You have become their emotional employee. And employees, unlike partners, do not have equal power. They rewrite history with confidence. You remember something clearly. A conversation. A promise. An event that happened in a particular way. And then the other person tells you, with complete certainty, that your memory is wrong. Not slightly wrong. Completely wrong. Not only do they remember it differently, they remember it with a conviction that makes your own memory feel unstable. They add details that shift the meaning entirely. They remind you of context you had apparently forgotten. And somewhere in that exchange, something shifts. You begin to wonder whether your memory can be trusted. Whether your perception is reliable. Whether you are, perhaps, the problem. This is gaslighting, and it is one of the most psychologically sophisticated tools in the manipulator's arsenal. Most people dismiss the possibility that this is happening to them because they believe they would know. They believe that manipulation of this kind would feel dramatic, obvious, detectable. But the manipulator's power comes precisely from the opposite. It feels like a reasonable disagreement between two people with different recollections. It feels like you might simply be misremembering. Jung's concept of the shadow is essential here. We all carry insecurities about our own perception, small doubts about whether we are seeing reality clearly, whether our judgment can be trusted. The skilled manipulator finds those insecurities and expands them. They do not create your self-doubt. They cultivate the self-doubt that was already there. Over time, this has a devastating effect. You stop trusting your own experience. You begin checking your perceptions against theirs before you allow yourself to feel certain about anything. You have handed them the authority to determine what is real. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." The manipulator's ultimate goal is to make that retreat inaccessible, to colonize your inner world with enough doubt that you can no longer find solid ground inside yourself. Trust your memory. Trust your perception. Not blindly, but enough to notice when someone is systematically working to undermine both. They use your vulnerabilities as ammunition. There is a moment in every deepening relationship when a person shares something they have never told anyone. A wound. A fear. A chapter of their life they are not proud of. A thing about themselves they have worked to hide. This is one of the most sacred acts in human connection. It is the moment when the persona drops and the actual self becomes visible. And in a genuine relationship, that vulnerability is received with care, held gently, protected, never weaponized. But the manipulator files it away. Not immediately. Not obviously. They respond with apparent warmth when you share. They may even reciprocate with a vulnerability of their own, though often one that is carefully calculated to feel equivalent without actually costing them anything. And then, later, in a moment of conflict, or when you begin to pull away, or when you assert something they find inconvenient, they use it. Not always directly. Sometimes it is a tone, a reference, an implication. A question framed so precisely around your private wound that you feel it land before you can even name what just happened. This is the manipulator's most intimate violation, the conversion of your trust into a tool of control. Nietzsche wrote that the secret to harvesting the greatest fruitfulness from existence is to live dangerously. What he meant was that real growth requires real exposure, the willingness to be seen completely. The manipulator understands this. And they position themselves as the safe space for that exposure, precisely so they can harvest what you plant there. The result is that many people, after this experience, stop being vulnerable with anyone. They build walls not against the specific person who hurt them but against intimacy itself. And that is perhaps the longest-lasting damage the manipulator causes, not what they did with your vulnerability, but what they taught you about the cost of having any. Protect your wounds. Not by hiding them from everyone, but by observing carefully how someone handles the small vulnerabilities before you offer them the large ones. They create dependency by alternating warmth and withdrawal. This is the sign that is most difficult to recognize from inside the relationship. Because from inside, it does not feel like manipulation. It feels like love, intense, consuming, and confusingly inconsistent. The pattern is precise even when it is not conscious. Periods of extraordinary warmth, attention, affection, validation, the feeling of being chosen and seen and deeply wanted. Followed by periods of inexplicable coldness. Distance that arrives without explanation. A withdrawal of attention that leaves you searching through your own behavior for what went wrong. And then the warmth returns. And the relief you feel in its return is so powerful, so disproportionate to what a stable relationship would produce, that you find yourself grateful in a way that has no relationship to anything the other person actually earned. This is what behavioral psychologists call variable reward conditioning. It is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Consistent reward produces satisfaction. Variable reward, unpredictable, intermittent, impossible to anticipate, produces obsession. The brain fixates on the pattern, desperate to understand it, desperate to produce the reward reliably. And in a relationship, that fixation feels indistinguishable from love. Jung would recognize this as a complex at work, an autonomous emotional pattern that has taken root in the psyche and now operates independently of rational judgment. You know, on some level, that the relationship is not stable. You know that the coldness is not your fault. But the complex has formed, and the complex does not respond to knowing. It responds to the variable reward. To the return of the warmth. The manipulator may or may not understand what they are doing. Some do this instinctively, shaped by their own early attachment wounds. Some do it with calculation. What matters is not their awareness. What matters is the effect on you and your willingness to name that effect honestly. In a genuine relationship, love does not require you to earn it back repeatedly. Stability is not the absence of passion. It is the presence of safety. Notice which one you actually have. They isolate you slowly and frame it as protection. Manipulation rarely announces its intention. It rarely says, "I want to separate you from the people who might help you see what I am doing." Instead, it says something that sounds entirely reasonable. Something that sounds like care. "I just feel like your friend doesn't really respect you. Your family doesn't understand what we have. I worry that person is a negative influence. I just want it to be us. Is that so wrong?" One comment, in isolation, is concern. A consistent pattern, a gradual narrowing of the social world, one relationship at a time, each exclusion framed as either your choice or your protection, is something else entirely. The manipulator understands, intuitively or deliberately, that your external relationships are a threat to their control. Not because those people are necessarily wise or healthy themselves, but because they represent an outside perspective. They are witnesses to who you were before. They are potential mirrors that might reflect something back to you that the manipulator needs you not to see. So the isolation happens carefully. Each removed relationship is replaced with greater intimacy from the manipulator. Each cut thread is compensated with increased warmth, increased availability, increased apparent investment in you specifically. And you, grateful for the attention and gradually unmoored from other sources of reflection, become easier to manage. The Stoics spoke endlessly about the importance of community, not as a luxury but as a philosophical necessity. Marcus Aurelius wrote that human beings are made for cooperation, and that to separate a person from others is to damage something essential in their nature. The manipulator exploits this need. They position themselves as your primary community. And then you're only one. Anyone who consistently, over time, makes the world around you smaller is not protecting you from the world. They are protecting themselves from it. There is a profound difference. They never take responsibility, but always accept credit. Watch this pattern carefully, because it appears in relationships, in workplaces, in families, anywhere that power operates through proximity. When something goes well, the manipulator is central to the success. They claim it with ease, with a naturalness that makes the claim seem obvious. But when something goes wrong, when there is conflict, failure, damage, or pain, a remarkable thing happens. Responsibility dissolves. It migrates. It lands, through a series of subtle redirections, on someone else. Usually you. This is not always obvious. It rarely sounds like direct accusation. It sounds more like, "I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't," or, "You know how I get when you behave that way." Or the particularly insidious, "I'm not saying it's your fault, but..." Each statement plants a seed of your complicity. Each redirection shifts the moral weight slightly in their direction. And because the manipulator maintains a fundamental self-image as a good person, as someone whose intentions are always essentially sound, the psyche does this almost automatically. The ego, as Jung observed, will perform extraordinary gymnastics to protect itself from accountability. Over time, you begin to absorb their failures. You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, explaining their behavior to other people, carrying a weight of responsibility that was never legitimately yours. Nietzsche was devastating on this point. He identified the refusal of accountability not as a simple character flaw, but as a fundamental expression of weakness, the unwillingness to face the truth of oneself. Real strength, for Nietzsche, required the capacity to own what you had done. The person who cannot do this is not powerful. They are fragile, and they make everyone around them carry what they cannot bear to hold themselves. The person who takes all the credit and accepts none of the responsibility has not built a successful life. They have built it on the labor and the guilt of the people around them. Notice whose hands are actually doing the work. They make you feel uniquely understood, then use that against you. This is the most seductive sign of all. And it is, for many people, the reason they stay. From the beginning, the manipulator sees you. Not the performed version of you, or the real one. They notice things no one else notices. They articulate things about you that you have never heard articulated. They reflect back an image of yourself that is somehow more complete, more understood, more recognized than anything you have found in other relationships. This feels like a miracle. Because for most people, people who have spent years being only partially seen, it is the closest thing to a miracle they have experienced. But here is what most people never realize in the moment. Being deeply seen and being deeply understood are not the same thing. The manipulator's perception of you is real, extraordinarily real. They are often among the most perceptive people you will ever encounter. But their perception is not in service of your growth. It is in service of their access. They see you clearly not because they love you, but because knowing you completely is the most efficient path to influencing you completely. Jung observed that the most effective psychological influence operates through the anima and animus, through the inner figures we project onto the people who seem to know us most intimately. When someone fits the shape of that inner image, when they appear to understand us at a level that goes beyond the ordinary, we open in ways we have never opened before. We extend trust that took years to build with anyone else. The manipulator enters through that door. And then, when conflict arrives, when you try to leave, when you set a boundary, when you assert something that threatens the arrangement, they use what they found behind that door. They turn your deepest self against you. They remind you, with precision, of your fears, of your wounds, of the parts of yourself you disclosed in moments of trust. The person who truly loves you uses what they know about you to help you grow. The person who is manipulating you uses what they know about you to keep you from leaving. That distinction is everything. The psychology behind this. Why do people manipulate? The honest answer is rarely malice. Malice would be simpler, easier to identify, easier to defend against. The truth is more uncomfortable. Most manipulators are deeply wounded people who learned, at some point in their development, that direct need was dangerous. That asking openly for love, for security, for validation produced rejection, punishment, or abandonment. So they developed indirect strategies. Strategies that got them what they needed without the vulnerability of asking. Jung believed that all psychological dysfunction originates in the unlived life, in the parts of the self that were suppressed because expression was too costly. The manipulator did not choose to be this way in any meaningful sense. They adapted. They survived. And the strategies that helped them survive in a threatening early environment became, in adulthood, the mechanisms through which they relate to everyone. This does not make what they do acceptable. It does not mean you are responsible for their healing. It does not mean you should stay. But it does mean that understanding them with clear eyes, without demonizing them and without excusing them, is the position from which you will make the wisest decisions about your own life. The manipulator is afraid. At the center of every strategy described in this video is fear, fear of abandonment, fear of inadequacy, fear of being seen fully and still rejected. That fear is real. It is human. And it is not your problem to solve. How to respond? When you recognize manipulation, whether in a current relationship or in the wreckage of a past one, there is a clear path forward. First, name it to yourself before you name it to anyone else. The act of internal recognition is itself a restoration of power. Say it clearly, inside your own mind, without softening it. This is manipulation. This is a pattern. I am not imagining this. Second, stop explaining yourself to someone who uses your explanations against you. Every time you over-explain, you offer more material, more insight into your thinking, more leverage. Say what is true, simply and once, and then observe what they do with it. Third, rebuild your external connections. The isolation a manipulator creates does not reverse itself automatically. You have to actively re-engage with the people and communities that were gradually moved to the margins. This requires vulnerability, the same vulnerability that was exploited. Do it anyway. Fourth, hold the line on what you know to be true. When your memory is questioned, your perception challenged, your reality rewritten, return to the facts you know. Write them down if necessary. The physical act of recording your own experience is a powerful antidote to gaslighting. It creates a version of events that exists outside the manipulator's ability to revise. Fifth, invest in your own clarity above all else. Meditation, journaling, therapy, stoic practice, whatever builds your relationship with your own inner world, do it with discipline. The manipulator's power depends on the gap between you and your own perception. Close that gap, and the manipulation loses its purchase entirely. Modern relevance. The 7 patterns described in this video are ancient. They predate psychology, predate philosophy, predate recorded history. Human beings have been manipulating each other since the beginning of social life. But the digital age has created conditions in which these patterns thrive more freely than at any previous moment in history. Social media has given manipulators unprecedented tools. The ability to curate an image of warmth, depth, and emotional intelligence to a wide audience creates the perfect persona, the mask that attracts people who are hungry for genuine connection. The attention economy rewards those who perform emotion most compellingly, regardless of whether the performance reflects anything real beneath it. Online relationships move quickly. Intimacy is compressed. The slow process of observing someone across time and context, the traditional way that character is revealed, is short-circuited. People share deeply before they have seen clearly. And the manipulator is often the one who pushed for that depth earliest, most warmly, most persuasively. At the same time, modern culture has created an epidemic of emotional illiteracy. The language of psychology, gaslighting, narcissism, love bombing, trauma bonding, has entered mainstream conversation. But knowing the vocabulary is not the same as having the emotional intelligence to recognize these dynamics in real time, while you are inside them, before the damage has accumulated. That gap, between knowing the words and truly seeing the patterns, is where manipulation lives. And closing that gap requires something social media cannot provide: deep, honest, sustained attention to your own inner experience. Powerful ending. You came into this video suspecting something. Maybe you couldn't name it. Maybe you had been told so many times that your perception was wrong that you had started to believe it. Maybe you were simply carrying a vague, persistent sense that something in a relationship, past or present, was not what it appeared to be. You were right. The patterns we explore today, the emotional leverage, the rewritten history, the weaponized vulnerability, the manufactured dependency, the quiet isolation, the evasion of accountability, the intimacy used as control, these are not the products of a disordered imagination. They are real. They are specific. They have names. And now you know them. That knowledge changes everything. Not because awareness is a shield against all future pain, but because the manipulator's power lives in the unconscious, in the gap between what is happening and what you are able to name. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He devoted his life to the belief that consciousness itself is the ultimate protection. That the person who can see clearly, who can look at the dynamics of their own relationships without flinching, possesses a freedom that cannot be taken from them. You now see more clearly than you did 16 minutes ago. That clarity is yours. No one can revise it, withdraw it, or use it against you. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, writing only for himself, at the end of long days governing an empire, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The manipulator was always trying to colonize your mind. To plant their version of reality so deeply inside you that you could no longer find your own. You have it back now. Guard it. Strengthen it. And let no one, no matter how well they appear to see you, no matter how warmly they appear to love you, be given the keys to a place only you should ever govern. That is not coldness. That is not the closing of the heart. That is the deepest form of self-respect. And it is the foundation on which every real, honest, mutual, genuinely loving relationship in your life will now be built. If this video gave you clarity you've been searching for, share it with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more hidden truths about psychology, philosophy, and the deeper patterns of human nature.